call the meeting for the Ag Advisory?
Just give it one second here.
Okay.
While it starts up. Okay, I think you're good to go, Lisa.
All right. Welcome, everybody. It's just at 2:01 p.m. on June 23rd, meeting for the Ag Advisory Committee. So I guess, shall we do an introduction of folks that are here?
Sure, that's a good idea.
Okay. I'm the chair, Lisa Aylard.
Maybe Lisa, if you could prompt us in your screen, if you can see everybody in your screen there.
Okay, I can't. I've got you on my cell phone, so I'm not sure how.
That's fine. Well, I can do that. So from staff here, we have Alex Dyer. I'm one of the planners. We have Charity Hallberg Dodds. She's our planning assistant. And Wendy Thompson is our manager of administrative services, general manager of administrative services. From the applicant, we have Tim Ply from the city of Port Alberni. And we have Willa Thorpe from the city of Port Alberni as well. And then we have Tanya Shannon, who's a director for Beaufort. Are you a member of the committee? No. So Tanya's not on the committee, but she is the representative for the area that the application is in. And then on our committee, we have Meg Curtis and Ron Emblem together on the same screen. And we have Larry McMahon. And we have Penny Cote. And then Lisa is our chair. That's all I can see on my screen. If I missed anybody, then I'm on the wrong screen.
Okay, yes, this is all kind of new for everybody. So
yeah.
Okay. So so we're just going to have a couple of things with the introduction of the new folks. Just to we were briefly going to go over the terms of reference and a conflict of interest.
Yeah, sure. I can start with that. So the we did email out a terms of reference to everybody that's on the committee. It is pretty dated, and it is our probably the next committee reference that we need to be updating. So what our plan to do is to come up with a draft in our new standardized format of what all of our committee terms of references look like, and we're going to bring that back to the next Ag committee meeting for discussion. So the primary focus of this committee is to provide recommendations to the board on ALR applications. And those applications are typically subdivisions within the ALR, non-farm uses within the ALR, or secondary residences or additional residences for farm help. This committee also advises on any land use policy, zoning, OCP, or anything like that has an impact on agriculture in the region, and then acts as an advocacy group in that end as well. So have a read through the terms of reference, put some thought into what you think it should look like to better reflect what this committee wants to achieve, and then we'll bring it back for discussion at the next committee meeting, and then we'll have the board consider adopting that. Does anybody have any questions about
Alex,
that? Or?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So what's wrong with the terms of reference now?
So there's nothing wrong with the content. Some of it needs to be updated. We do have a standardized format for all of our terms of reference that lays out in a familiar format for the board to understand. So that is something we've been working on the last couple of years. Wendy, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to add, just to bring it up to date and make sure it matches our procedures policy for all our procedures bylaw for all our committees. So it just needs updating in our new format and making sure it follows current policies and procedures of the regional district. So it would come to this committee for
Wendy, what needs updating though? Like what is against the policies in it?
Well, there's nothing against the policies right now. It's just really out of date. So it doesn't refer to our, all our committees now. In our terms of reference, we referred that the procedures of our procedures bylaw apply. So it's just really updating it and saying that our procedures bylaw for the regional district applies to all these committees. So when we bring it back, we'll bring a report and, describe the changes and also provide a copy of our procedures bylaw. For example, it just spells out, you know, agendas have to be, there should be agendas for these meetings. They should be posted on our website within 48 hours to the committee, those type of things. So mostly housekeeping.
Thanks, Wendy.
So
Do we
shall
have any
move
other
on? Yeah.
comments? I just see that Wayne Smith has joined us as well. I don't know if you can hear us, Wayne. He's still, oh. All right. Back to you, Lisa, if you
Okay,
we can wait for Wayne to connect.
okay. Let's wait for that. So I guess, so those we'll be looking towards a new meeting for those procedures for discussion.
Yeah, we don't have a timeline for that yet, but I'd rather do it sooner than waiting for another ALR application, because I don't think we have any other ALR applications waiting. So we'll staff will put something together. If anybody has any feedback, please email it off to us. We're happy to incorporate, and then we will organize a meeting in the near future to further discuss that.
Okay, thank you. All right, so moving on to the application.
Sure. So I can introduce this if everybody likes, and then I'll pass it on to Tim and Willa to explain on their behalf. So this is an application we have before you for the McLean Mill property. The applicant, who is the city of Port Alberni, they intend to continue operating the McLean Mill National Historic Site with associated tourism uses. The uses included within their application include the operation of the steam-powered sawmill and associated logging demonstrations, heritage tourism rail service, site tours, interpretive center, food services, gift shop, campground, one caretaker, and the hosting of events, festivals, celebrations, and programs permitted under the regulations of the ACRD. So the intent here is to continue the operation of McLean Mill as it has been operating in the recent past. To give a bit of background on how we got to this point, the Agricultural Land Commission actually considered resolutions in 1992 and 1993 that allowed for the subdivision of the land to actually create this parcel. And the actual wording in the resolutions was to develop the 12.8 hectare parcel as a historic site. So while the intention was clear that the site was to be restored as a National Historic Site and developed as a forestry and mill interpretation center, the ALC decisions did not really specifically consider any of the potential non-farm uses. The non-farm uses associated with this site, such as the tourism-related food and gift services, campground, and public events. So in February of 2020, the city did receive a notification from the Agricultural Land Commission that it considered some of these uses to be considered as non-farm uses, contrary to the Agricultural Land Commission legislation. So that's what prompted this application. Staff have reviewed it. It complies with our Beaufort official community plan as well as our ACRD zoning bylaw. Planning staff are supportive of the application as presented. You know, the zoning has allowed for the diversification of a number of different uses on this site over the years, including the addition of the interpretive center, I guess at the beginning of the tourism related activities at the site, but also the music festival in 2017 and the campground, which I think was developed in 2018. So the applicant, I mean, the application really represents a continuation of the current use of the property and represents a variety of heritage focused uses that provide economic and cultural benefit to the community. So with that, the staff recommendation is to recommend that the ACRD board support the application and that it be forwarded to the Agricultural Land Commission, noting that it complies with our land use policies in the Beaufort OCP and the zoning bylaw. So maybe with that, I'll ask Tim and Willa if you want to add anything or go ahead.
Sure, I'll jump in, and I'll note that Willa needs to leave at 3 o'clock if we're still engaged then. And I'll start off. So my name is Tim Ply. I'm the city's Chief Administrative Officer. When I got into this role 4.5 years ago, council of the day felt so strongly that they wanted to make improvements and changes at McLean Mill that they said they wanted McLean Mill to be managed out of the CAO's office. So I found myself being hands-on there, and I haven't been able to stop being hands-on. Even though really McLean Mill lives in Willa's department, she's director of Parks, Rec, and Heritage. So Will and I kind of tag team some of these things. So I will maybe give a brief overview if that's all right with you folks, and I'll ask Willa to fill in any blanks. And really, we need to know what you need to know. So I'll try to stop talking quickly, and then we'll respond to questions if you like. Alex gave a great report and a summary of that report. I can tell you that the city, find myself in a position I thought I would never be in, making an application for non-farm use for city lands, a heritage site nonetheless, but here we are. So the city owns McLean Mill. We've been operating it largely in the same way for about 25 years. There have been some changes over the years, and a couple of key changes in the last few years that probably have resulted in us being here, where complaints been made to the ALC. ALC has said, hey, you know what, you don't have any status to do any of those things you're doing. And the city regards, as Alex elaborated, that the Land Commission created McLean Mill for the intention of allowing it to operate as a National Historic Site, but gave no details of that. And so we believe their intent was to enable McLean Mill National Historic Site to operate as such. And then we find ourselves now with no specific permissions. So we don't even have permissions that a status farm would have. We can't host any events according to ALC's current interpretation. And we feel that we're in compliance with local government zoning and governance. And we ask the commission to enable local government to manage this essentially. So we have a list of 13 permissions we're asking for. I can summarize those or speak to those if you have questions. I do want to point out to you that the city has an agreement between ourselves and the Government of Canada for the oversight and management of McLean Mill National Historic Site. Crown gave us more than $2 million in the 90s to improve and upgrade the site, which we did, and the city agreed to operate it, preserve the heritage, and make it available to people, to visitors for 43 years, I believe. And we've been doing that. And our strategy in doing, in preserving the heritage and presenting the heritage is that in terms of preserving the heritage, Willa's department is in charge of that. And we've been doing some good work in recent years, investing in some of the assets that were improved in the early 90s and are now dilapidated and need attention. And we have plans to continue to do that over the next 5 years. One of our strategies to do that is that we've now applied a 10% heritage fee for every transaction that occurs on McLean Mill site or to do with McLean Mill site. So if you buy a stuffy or a hoodie from the gift shop online, you're going to pay a 10% heritage fee, and that 10% fee goes straight into capital reinvestment in the mill, preservation of heritage. And we're really proud. Actually, I'm really proud of that. Will and I are both really proud of that. That we're enabling people to contribute to the preservation of the heritage that way. In terms of getting visitors to the site, there are some challenges there. It's a little off the beaten path. Folks who are traveling from the ferry to the West Coast don't have time often to get to the site. And if they do, they don't have time to linger on the site because they have to get to their accommodation site. So we often hear from the visitor center that people say, well, I'll go next time I'm back through, but I just don't have time right now. So one of the ways that we're endeavoring to get visitors on the site is to host as many events and diverse events as we can. So we'll attract people to the site for those events, and they'll interact with the heritage while they're there. And whether that's weddings or funerals or spoken word festivals or even music festivals, people are interacting with the heritage in ways that they might not have intended otherwise. And we think we're achieving our mandate as per our agreement with the Government of Canada in that way. So as I said, there's 13 permissions we're looking for. I can go through all those. I think your time's better spent having Willa and I respond to your questions, unless you tell me otherwise. Madam Chair?
Okay. Any questions or anything like that? Okay. Oh, here's a few questions. Oops, it disappeared on me. How do I find that
Here.
again?
Penny, did you have a comment?
I have questions.
Okay, you go ahead, and then Meg, I think Meg's next.
Okay, thank you. The map doesn't really show the property that's been provided, so not sure the actual property. I know that parts of what you're proposing is inside the heritage designation and some is outside.
That's correct. As Alex has pointed out in his report, it'll be in our report as well. It's probably easier found. Alex, do you recall the size of the site?
It's 12.8 hectares, so about 30 acres is the total site.
Thank you. And a portion of that we've designated as the historic zone. So that is an area where and I'm going to rely on Willa to help me out here. In the historic zone, we've essentially taken a snapshot of, I believe it's 1955. Willa, is that the era?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell us about that? What does that look like on the historic zone?
And just for the committee's reference as well, there is a map included or a sketch that outlines the historic zone as well as the non-historic zone. So there's a variety of structures, including the sawmilling site itself, log pond, and then the various zones. So you'll see it's color coordinated in the map there. So
everything within the black boundary is the historic zone.
That's correct. So we're looking at the bottom part of the outside of the historic zone, so that what we'd consider the non-historic zone, that's where the main entrance is, gift shop, administration, that sort of thing. And then you head through the forest and into the historic zone, which would incorporate all of the mill specific components. So a variety of structures, again, related to sawmilling itself, markets and transportation, labor and people, and logging.
Can I continue?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I just have a question about the application that's coming forward is for a number of different economic, basically, the camping and the store and the food services. Those are all outside of the historic site area? Am I correct?
Some of them might be outside and some of them might be on. So the gift shop, for example, is off the historic zone. Some of the events most of the events are planned, if there's a wedding or a funeral or a corporate retreat, it will be planned off the historic zone. But there is a provision for our operator, the Chamber of Commerce, to utilize the historic zone space with a prior agreement with the city.
Okay, thank you. So that would include the interpretation center as well.
The interpretation center is off the historic zone. It's in the non-historic zone. But a lot of the interpretive activities will occur on the historic zone.
Okay, so I'd like to see this application go forward. I just have questions about the difference between the historic site and what it's actually providing for this application and what's outside of it.
Sure, and maybe it'll help if I can explain that within the historic zone, we're really limited on what we can do. We can't even put a shovel in the ground. We shouldn't put a shovel in the ground without going through our museum staff to say, we want to dig a hole here. What does that look like to you? And then they're going to give us criteria for what we have to do for disturbing heritage, essentially, and make sure that if we unearth any artifacts, those are cataloged and that sort of thing. Now, I'll tell you, we haven't always been our best managers of heritage on that site. We have, over the years, had different groups operating the site for us and not held them to account on that point. We certainly are now. Willa and her staff, we've actually staffed up in Willa's department to maintain the site to the standard it needs to have. And if you've been on site recently, you'll see the evidence of that. So in the historic zone, we're really limited in what we can do. So it's really, you can put up a table, you can put up a tent and then take it down again. You can't make permanent changes. It is a snapshot of 1955. Even if you look at the roofs that Willa's team repaired last year, the shingles are period correct. They're not modern shingles. But off the site, and this is common with, if you likely all traveled around and got to other historic zones around the world, other sites. Often you'll go into an interpretive center where you'll be educated around the history you're about to be exposed to. You'll go onto the historic site, whether it's McLean Mill or Culloden or World War II site. And you'll be limited in what you can do and touch there. And then you'll be introduced to the heritage. And when you walk out, you'll coincidentally walk through the gift shop, like that kind of thing, right? And you'll be able to buy a piece of that, a memento, and take it away with you. So McLean Mill is really no different than all of those historic zones or historic sites around the world. And maybe because it's in Port Alberni, we're a little bit, we don't maybe see it in the same light as that.
So question, I don't know if Alex knows this question. The mill site being in ALR land, are other historic sites under the same issues with ALR? Are they in ALR?
There are other historic sites in other parts of the province that are on ALR. I mean, this is the only one in our area, of course. I don't have a lot of history on that. I think the city's submission actually delves into that a little bit. Tim, if you want to expand on that.
That's correct. For each of the 13 activities that we've requested permission, non-farm use permissions, we've listed a number of other historic sites that undertake that same activity. So I just flipped to page 15, hosting events. It's consistent with events on historic sites such as Barkerville, Hart Creek Ranch, Fort Rod Hill, Britannia Mine National Historic Site, Burnaby Village, Craig Derrick Castle, Fort Steele, Fort Langley, BC Forest Discovery, and the list goes on. And some of those, not all of them, but some of them are on agricultural land reserve land. So this isn't unique in that sense. Some of the specifics we're asking for, like operating a steam mill, is unique, but operating historic equipment is not unique on ALR land.
So, and just so everybody knows, I'm kind of having a little trouble. There's sometimes people are sending messages and I can't see all of it all at once. I'm trying to figure out this technology. So I'd appreciate if people could, if they could ask questions. I do know that there is a question regarding Bill 15. I don't know with these new bills that are coming in, how it's going to affect even further. I know it's certainly affecting those of us that are on agricultural production lands. So I'm curious with these new changes that are coming, and they say that there's more coming, whether you're going to be back again to revisit what you need to ask for permission on this piece of property. And the city or the regional district now has the ability to remove land out of the ALR, do they not?
So I can speak to that, Lisa. And actually, Megan had submitted a question in the chat here. She had asked, and you've summarized it perfectly, but Bill 15 introduced a regulation that requires the ACRD to now make applications on behalf of landowners. Does this decision have a precedent for future decisions related to non-farm use that the ACRD will be asked to take to the ALC on behalf of landowners? Can you speak to other precedents you think this decision will set? So my answer to that is the change in the legislation that Bill 15 will introduce is the inability for a private landowner to apply to remove their land from the ALR. It does not have to do with non-farm uses. So in this case, the city's not applying to remove McLean Mill from the ALR. It's simply applying to continue the non-farm uses at the site itself. So, I mean, whether we're going to see any further changes to the Agricultural Land Commission Act, like has been kind of introduced, over the last year, we'll just have to react to that as time goes. I don't anticipate that they're going to bring in any new legislation that's going to impact any existing decisions they've made. So applying for an ALC decision is really the best effort that an applicant can make to make sure that their uses and their sites comply with that Land Commission Act. Does that kind of answer your question a little bit, Lisa?
Yeah, it does. It's just because people are having issues. I mean, the regional district as well has been having to deal with secondary dwellings. I mean, you know, we're to be able to house a second person to help on the farm has become a big issue. And I am a little concerned that they're going to change the rules yet again. It's, you know, a lot of us have a business on ALR property, and, you know, everybody was going along, and then all of a sudden somebody comes in and they decide that they want to reinvent or decide what you're allowed to be able to do onto your property. So I would be concerned that this will continue to happen, because as the ALC mandate is to protect farmland at all costs, it seems.
Yes. So Meg had actually submitted a few more questions as well. And Meg, I don't know if you want to read them out, or if you'd like me to read them out,
Sure.
if that's easier for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the questions that's like, I don't know, almost an elephant in the room after the Bill 15 explanation was like, why hasn't anyone ever asked for this property to be removed from the ALR?
Mm-hmm.
That I think the McLean Mill, the original plan for McLean Mill called for it to be removed, the land to be removed from the ALR. And I don't know what happened between that and the actual creation of the lot. Originally, that land was owned by McMillan Waddell, and it was ALC agreed to have the subdivision occur and take off that historic site, that 30-acre site. Initially, ALC said only if the other two large lots of M&B were combined, I believe, Alex, was the language. And
yeah.
And then M&B said no. And then in the next year, there was a reapplication, and ALC consented to create the lot without requiring McMillan Waddell to consolidate. And so I'm making a longer answer out of this. The intention was to take it out of the ALC. I don't know what happened. I have to assume that that inquiries were made and it looked like it wouldn't be successful. So instead, we got permission for subdivision in the early 90s. NALC supported the subdivision with really very vague direction, you know, to enable essentially to establish a National Historic Site. And clearly in today's light and today's regulations, we are operating outside of the regulation. And I don't think that was intended in the 90s. And we find ourselves having to clarify this fact. And we did consider making an application to remove it. We don't think that would be successful, and we don't think it would be, we don't think it needs to be removed. We just need to have permissions to operate a National Historic Site.
So maybe that relates to one of my other questions. I guess I'm confused on why it shouldn't be removed, because I thought that a lot of the activities that farmers were allowed that are non-farm use activities require farm status. And I'm wondering, you know, what is the potential of the property for agriculture? Is there potential there? That's one of my questions. And the other one is, do you think acquiring farm status is an issue here?
So, Meg, first of all, there are a number of non-farm uses that are opened up to farmers if they have farm status. An example would be agritourism and short-term rental, right? Where, you know, they're not permitted within the ALR unless you have farm status and you meet certain criteria. Then you can do farm stays and weddings and all that sort of stuff over a certain number per year, I think it is. So the way the ALC has drafted a lot of their legislation, it allows for non-farm uses to legitimate farmers. With this case, and I'll let Tim speak to the capability for the rest of the property for agricultural use, but we have included a summary of the soil capability in the report, and about 70% of the site, basically the majority of the historic area of the property is about 80% class 3 soils and 20% class 4. And then there are some class 2 soils actually closer to the fish hatchery and the river on the east side of the property. So there are some soil capabilities there. Whether there's any potential for future food production or agricultural uses, you know, that will largely be up to the property owner.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just echo those comments. You know, the city is involved in there in that site because of the heritage, and if we were to pursue farm status, it would really just be a workaround to enable some non-farm uses, and wouldn't be productive for heritage, and it wouldn't be productive for local government or for ALC in our minds. So that's not a choice we would make. And we have to remember that as well, this is a former industrial site, and it has some contamination remaining on site. Some has been remediated. Some has been identified as being within the threshold and able to stay on site. So if we were to want to put any of this property into food production, we'd have to figure that aspect out as well. Now, having said that, if somebody approached us and said, we want to run a small agricultural operation on the site, if it was on the historic zone, it would have to be period correct. If it was off that zone, like the fish hatchery is, the city would certainly be open to that.
And Lisa, we have a question from Penny Cote as well. How is fisheries considered in agriculture? That's not something that I'm all that familiar with. I know that the Agricultural Land Commission Act allows for some restoration activities and things like that within riparian areas, but the actual fish hatchery use and the fish ladder that's there and all the enhancement uses that go on, I don't know if that is considered in the Agricultural Land Commission Act now. It is listed in their application. So if this application proceeds to the Land Commission, they'll have a chance to consider all aspects of it, including the current fish hatchery uses.
And I think there is a thing from Penny asking who takes the lead in that. I know it's the Salmon Enhancement Society, I believe, that's been running that, but I think there is some oversee with DFO, with Erica Blake, I think, and Dave Clough.
It's operated by Alberni Valley Enhancement Association, and you're right, Lisa, those names are involved there. And I think they're doing some really good work. They've really done some good restoration work on Cosexas Creek. The salmon returns there, and I believe they're working on other streams as well.
Yeah.
And to Alex's point, we made application to have permission to continue to do that as well, to continue to have to host the hatchery there.
Okay. Any other questions?
Can I jump in, Lisa? I see Megan has a question. I think it was why are we here? Is that the question, Megan? Why?
Yeah. What issues does the ALC have? Do you believe that compelled this application to begin with?
Yeah. Thank you. We had been in conversation with the planning division of ALC, and while we're having a conversation with them about the site and next best steps, we were contacted by Compliance and Enforcement Branch of ALC. They had received a complaint, and they investigated that complaint and found that we were non-compliant and wrote us a letter and said, you need to make an application or we'll take action. So we found ourselves really with no good other recourse except to make an application.
Is there any other questions?
Like
Any other inputs?
Penny and Tanya. Tanya, you go first, and then Penny up next. Work.
Okay, thank you. I do have a question getting back to Tim, your comments on contamination. Because I know that if you can't have agriculture on the property because of contamination, and I know that you guys have been working on things, so there's some areas that are within the threshold of where it can be, and others are being fixed. Has it all been taken care of, the ones that need to be fixed, or is there still some on your list that need to be looked at?
Thank you, Tanya. And so when I say this contamination on site, we're aware of some contamination that there was some remediation done in the early 1990s prior to the site getting national park status, national historic site status. And since then, we've done a little bit of, I think 2 years ago, we did a stage 1, and we did some soil sampling in the lagoon. And there's still some contamination on site. The experts working with the city tell us there's not a risk of movement or transferring to other areas. But I'd have to believe that if we were going to go into food production, the standard would be higher than it is for a disused industrial site. So to your point, Tanya, one of the things that probably the most evident need for remediation is there's still at least two in-ground fuel tanks that are adjacent to the log pond. And we're going to be undertaking some remediation work on the log pond dam this summer. And we're hopeful that if we have to increase our budget to do that. We didn't have enough last year when we tried to do it. We're hopeful that if our pricing is good, we'll be able to do that work at the same time. So I can't promise that right now. And we're also working with the Industrial Heritage Society to see if they want to take on all or a portion of that project, and maybe a revenue generator for them, and maybe we can get some extra work done as well.
Okay, thank you. I just bring that up because I note that even though the adjacent properties to the mill are private managed forest land, there is beyond that agriculture. And if there's worries of contamination, especially by the waterway, that it's great to hear that if there is a problem, you guys are aware and there is a plan to rectify that, just not for if there was food production or any agriculture on the site itself, but for neighboring properties.
I believe
you.
Penny, you had a comment, Penny?
Thanks. My question was basically answered through earlier questions, so I'll just leave it. Thanks.
All right, is there any more information anybody wants to bring forward or questions? So are we finished with discussion?
If I can jump in, if anybody on this call has advice for the city, we're happy to take it as far as how we can be better stewards of the land as well.
Okay. Okay, Meg?
I guess I just have one comment. Just that, like, it's still, I don't know how the ALC will react to this application, but still sort of like a lingering thought in my mind that you don't have farm status and you sort of want an exception, but then what's the precedent that sets for other farms who have farm status and apply for a campground and are rejected? Because we know that happens, those sort of things happen. So just like keeping that in the back of our minds, I think that this is a precedent and it's sort of exceptional. But yeah, we'll see what happens, I guess.
If I can respond to that, we don't believe that it's precedent setting because we believe that there's other historic sites on agricultural land, reserved land, that are operating campsites. So, and the fact that we don't have farm status, I think just makes it more evident that we're a national historic site, and 20 years or 40 years from now, we're going to be a more valuable national historic site because that heritage is only going to get more valuable. So it's not, in my mind, it's not going to be turned into agricultural land. And it's a bit of a challenge, I'm sure, for the ALC to have to regulate this site. But likewise, it's a challenge for us as an operator to operate a national historic site when the metric we're measured by is farm status, because we're not a farm. We shouldn't, it would be wrong, not in the public interest, in my opinion, for us to engage in farm activity there just to prove that we have farm status so that we can backdoor permissions that other historic sites have. So we recognize we're an anomaly. We don't think we're precedent setting, and we think that ALC can get these permissions without limiting their ability to make decisions in other areas.
All right. Okay, any more questions? And then I guess we can have discussion with the committee.
Tanya?
Thank you. Just going back to campgrounds, and I missed one of my notes that I was writing down. The city's applying to do like events, festivals, weddings, things like that. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, if you have farm status and you're able to do this, you're limited to the number of events that you can host. Is the
Correct.
city anticipating a limit or capping what your plans are for the mill with your application here?
Well, thanks, Tanya. Again, there's a limit on status farms on how many events or weddings they can host because they're farms, and we're not a farm, and so we haven't proposed a limit to that because we don't think that if we had 5 or 10 or 40, it doesn't impact the farmability of the land. It's a National Historic Site, and we don't believe it impacts the farmability of any neighboring properties either. So for that reason, we haven't. We're not seeking equality with status farms. We're seeking a decision that reflects that this is a national historic site, and it's not going to stop being that. In fact, even if that mill goes away for some reason, if we lose it to fire, we're likely to rebuild it and a replica historic site. And so we're trying not to sort of manipulate the system and pretend we're a farm and get the status farm, because it's just a different category altogether.
All right. Okay, I guess discussion for this, I guess we'll say is closed. Can we have a closed discussion for our committee, Alex?
So we can't kick out the applicants or anything. So, I mean, we're welcome to have any discussion or comments at this point, and happy to take a motion if somebody would like to propose one as well.
Okay.
Penny here. I'd like to know what the process is now. Just because we have an audience.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I can speak to that. So the this committee advises the board of directors. So this application is on the agenda for the board of directors consideration tomorrow afternoon. The board is the first local stopgap for ALR applications. So the board has to pass a resolution to forward it on to the Agricultural Land Commission for their consideration. And that's what the board will be considering tomorrow, whether or not to forward on this application and whether it wishes to add any additional comments that go with that. If it does go to the Agricultural Land Commission, then they will take some time. I think they have a 60 business day turnaround right now. I don't know exactly what that means in the current environment, but they will go through a process to consider the application, consider the implications to agriculture land in the area, and make a decision on it. So that is the process moving forward. Yes, Penny?
So can you expand on that, please? So then when does the public consultation come into effect?
So with ALR applications, there is no statutory requirements for public consultation. There's no public hearings held or anything like that. It is a process decision that the Land Commission will make based on their parameters and their knowledge of what their ALC regulations are. So it is a little unique that way. It's not like a rezoning application where a public hearing would be held. It is a referral that the ACRD receives, and then we send it back to the province for their decision.
All right. So I guess for those of us that have sat on the Ag Advisory are probably having a bit of a hard time with this one because dealing with the ALC lately and the expectations on farmland, and then having a National Historic Site still within an ALR zoning that is now being affected, basically. I'm not sure how we can come up with a recommendation regarding this, because basically it is special status on ALR land. I mean, just to cut it to the basics.
Yeah, I think Lisa, like basically their argument is that we're on farmland, but we're not a farm, and we're not going to pretend to be a farm, and we want an exception because we are an exception. But what I get stuck on is, well, if that's true, then your application should be to remove yourself. I don't know if I can comfortably say that you don't have to conform to the same rules we're all increasingly subjected to because of your exceptional status because everyone else is being bulldozed by rules every month.
Yes, this is a problem.
So I would just like to throw out there and note that this is why the Agricultural Land Commission has an application process for this, right? So they do set the rules and you know they have updated the rules substantially in the last few years. The committee's well aware of that, but the you know they'll always have this application process that allows for people to you know if they feel like they have the rationale to support it, to apply for a subdivision or to apply for a certain type of non-farm use or a second residence in the ALR. You know, it's our job to consider the local impacts of that, I guess, and the impacts on the site and the neighboring farming uses. But ultimately, it's up to the Agricultural Land Commission and the province to regulate uses of farmlands, and that's just, you know, they've just created an application process that allows them to do that on a case-by-case basis.
So do I hear, is there anybody willing to set forth a resolution or a recommendation? Not
Hey,
hearing.
Ron wants to speak.
Move it forward. It's a historic site. There's no agriculture around there. Just let it go. Move it forward.
Okay,
Do you want to make a motion to that, Ron?
If you want to, yep, go ahead. Write it down however you want. Make
Okay.
a motion to move it forward to from our committee to the regional district, and then they can forward it to the ALC if they're okay with it.
Okay, thank you, Ron.
okay, so hearing the motion is to forward the application as is.
Is there a seconder on the motion?
Larry McMahon.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor?
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay,
At this point, when it comes to the board, is there an opportunity for community to comment at that point? I'm just saying that because I have received calls regarding this application as a director on the board and sitting on this committee.
So the board can decide tomorrow what they want to do with that. I mean, if it is a public meeting, so the board can receive delegations or what have you if they choose to. I know that the agenda is set for the meeting already, but there's always an opportunity to either defer a decision on it if they wish to hear more from the public, or to actually invite somebody to speak at the meeting tomorrow. Yep, a follow-up, Penny?
I believe that this is a really fast turnaround, having the meeting today and then passing it tomorrow. And I just have problems with such fast turnarounds with any kind of application like this. It's quite a big one. I think that there'll be a lot of support coming from the community for this application. But because I have heard from a few people that were questioning it, I'm not sure what their questions are really pertaining to. But I just feel like giving the community opportunity to comment or ask questions is important. And I also have a question about this. Once the application goes to the board, and if the board passes along to the ALR, Agricultural Commission, then you said it takes about 60 days for a turnaround for that?
They have guidelines on how long that they'll consider applications. To be fair, I don't know what that is in the COVID-19 environment. That might be different, but
so I'm just wondering then if that's the case, that would basically eliminate this summer, almost all of it, for McLean Mill to be able to operate, to do any of those activities unless they're doing them without permission. So I just don't see the rush then, if this is the case, that they won't be able to do anything this season. And we give the community opportunity. And like I said, I believe there will be a lot of support for this. So just a question.
So are we going back to the motion set forward by Ron to forward it and seconded by Larry?
I'm still in favor of this because it seems that that this is more of an administrative glitch that occurred, many years ago, and the site has been used for these activities, for a long time. And like I just can't see the public being, adverse to the committee supporting, normalizing what was intended a long time ago for this heritage site. And to me, just from the business aspects of being able to operate the non-farm uses, it just kind of makes sense for us to support that. It's good for the community. It doesn't seem to have against the Agriculture Act itself. So I just see this, from many perspectives.
Okay, so Penny, from your question there, do you want something put forward about more public interaction with regards to ALR applications in future, or?
I think that that's probably a good suggestion, a recommendation going forward. Any application that's turned around this fast really causes the public to contact the directors such as myself and say that they didn't have an opportunity. So that's all I'm asking for here. I'm not saying that we shouldn't make the recommendation today, but I'm just saying that having it at the board meeting tomorrow is very fast. And it eliminates any opportunity for any kind of public comment going forward. So it's not actually at this board, that it's the next step. That's why I keep asking about steps and processes, and that way then everything goes forward. I've been through this a few times where we've made decisions at the board where it was quickly turned around, and then we get grief from the community, where if we had taken the steps, then everything is open and transparent, and opportunity for people to comment. And that's all. So having the board meeting tomorrow with no time to put in a delegation and comments only after we've voted, it just takes away the public's opportunity. Thanks.
All right, so we have this motion sitting on the floor then.
Tanya, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I guess my comment is that might be a great thing for the terms of reference for this committee. And then my question was, if there's a happy medium between Penny's concerns and pushing this forward, is it unreasonable to ask that this is like our next board meeting? Or, I mean, I don't vote on this recommendation because I don't sit on this committee. I'm here as director of the Beaufort because the application was within the Beaufort. But just a thought that I had.
Yeah, so the board can make that recommendation at the meeting tomorrow. I mean, it's on the agenda already. If the board feels like it needs to take a step back and gather some additional information, the board is within its rights to defer a decision on it until the next meeting.
So again, the motion sitting on the floor, are we leaving as is, or does there need to be a modification? It was seconded.
It's up to the committee.
All right. Ron?
We're on mute. Yep, sorry. Ron?
Sorry.
I just say, let it go. You get them talk this thing to forever. There's nothing's gonna happen, and then it's a place for the city to get some money back for this thing. And it's not bothering anybody in agriculture. There's nothing around there.
Okay. All right. So the motion set forward by Ron was to forward the application as is, seconded by Larry. So all those in favor? Can we go through the list? So Ron's Penny?
Voted in favor.
Do you want a
Yeah.
yes or
Yeah, yes, please.
yes?
Okay, so Penny. We don't have Bob Haynes. Wayne Smith? I don't
Yes.
know. Yes?
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Megan?
Yeah, so is there something between yes and no? Because my position is if the site is polluted and it can never be a farm, then you need to apply to remove it. I don't understand the application. I think it needs to be applied.
Okay, so that's maybe abstaining,
Yeah, sure.
okay? And we don't have John on, no?
No.
Larry, he seconded it.
Yes.
Okay. And like Meg, I'm really of two minds of this, having dealt with the ALC and the ALR with regards to various things that we dealt with. But you know, the ALC and the city, I guess they need to make some kind of decision. So I guess I will say this needs to go forward to have it decided upon.
So that is a majority vote of the committee present. So we will make that recommendation to the board tomorrow, and then we'll let the board decide what they want to do.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. So we'll make a note of the time of 2:58. Is there any other things that need to be dealt with before we adjourn?
Lisa, if I can just say thank you, and then on behalf of the city and Will and I, thank you very much for your consideration on this. I can appreciate it's just challenging for this group, and I think you had some really good debate. Again, thank you, and I'll sign off now.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay. Anybody else? I guess we are finished our meeting here. And thank you for everybody's participation in these interesting times. And hopefully some of us will learn a little bit more about the technology of how to run these things as well.